Do you remember Susan Smith? You probably do if you were an adult somewhere around 1994 like me. I didn't expect her to be coming into the news right now, 30 years after her horrific crimes, but she's coming up for parole, shocking everybody. Here's what happened if you're unfamiliar or if you need a little refresher. Susan Smith was convicted of killing her 2 young boys. Michael, who had just turned 3, and Alexander, who went by Alex, who was just 14 months old. She had them in their car seats, and she rolled her car into a lake. This was in South Carolina. It was the John D. Long Lake. Car went in, it sank, she watched it go down, and then she pretended that her boys were taken by a carjacker, blamed a black man. There was 9 days of searching, trying to find the boys, poor little boys. She and her husband, David, had been separated by that point. Apparently, they got married when she was only 19 and already pregnant with Michael. It sounds like she did not have the easiest life. Excuses absolutely nothing, but it maybe sheds a little bit of light on how she became the monster she did. She had stuff from her stepfather and her background, and apparently she went to a school teacher and the principal and the sheriff, and nobody listened to her. Doesn't absolve her of anything. Apparently the motive was that she had met a new guy. There's a letter he wrote that they brought into the trial where he says that, she's lovely and he really likes her, but he doesn't want children. And I'm sure he says, I'm sure your boys are great. Doesn't matter how great they are. I've never wanted children and I still don't. So in her twisted mind, this was the way to get this man that she loved, do away with her children. And again, she pretended for 9 days that they had been taken, kidnapped by a carjacker who was a black man. There's so many levels of ick here. I remember the news conferences. She looked, it also felt fake. You could look at her husband, David. He looked gutted and shocked and almost like a zombie, which you would expect of someone whose children were just suddenly gone. She fake cried, very clear. It was so clearly fake crying. I don't think there were actually any tears. Weird things. TV cameras first showed up at the house. Her husband looked just gutted, and she looked excited to be on TV. Later, this is David, her husband, her now ex, obviously, said that she always wanted to get attention. She always wanted to be in the spotlight. Never probably expected to be in this kind of spotlight, but she was always very manipulative. And he says that has not changed. So here's the surprising part. She is up for parole, and there will be a parole hearing on November 20th. So a lot of people are going, what the heck? I thought she was in prison for life. Turns out that wasn't a thing. And when she was sentenced in 1995. The trial began July 17th of 1995. It lasted a week. And when she was then declared guilty of murdering her 2 boys, then they went into the penalty phase. The options were life or the DP. The prosecutors were going for the DP, and because they found the car, obviously, eventually, pulled it up, and it had not only her poor little boys strapped in, but her wedding album and documents from the wedding. They said anything relating to her marriage except for her actual husband in that car that she also put into the bottom of that lake. So leading up to the trial, they actually did a test to put their own car into the lake to see what would happen and how long it would take. Nose down, and it took 6 minutes to be submerged. And they said they had a video of, we can watch the water slowly coming up through the panels. 6 minutes. And she had to see that, which is horrifying. This is the head prosecutor. I guess in South Carolina, they called him the solicitor, which sounds very British to me. But he said that in a lot of what she said and a lot of the lies that you hear criminals say, there's going to be a kernel of truth. In some of her descriptions of how her boys were supposedly taken, She goes, I could hear them crying, mommy, mommy. And he says, I think that part happened. She heard them crying and calling for her, which is just gutting. The jury came back. They had already come back with a guilty verdict, of course. Now they came back saying life. Turns out it wasn't until 1996, the very next year, mind you, that South Carolina, at least, I don't think this was nationwide, but at least in South Carolina, that the option for life without the possibility of parole was even a thing. Juries were not allowed to be told that people given life would actually have the chance for parole after 30 years. So her technical sentence was 30 years to life. We've now hit the 30-year mark as of November 4th. So a couple other little minor things. When she was first arrested, she confessed to the police, but when the solicitor showed up and he said, okay, well, where's the record of her confession? They said, oh, she was too upset. We didn't record it or write anything down.
What?
And he goes, okay, well, we're going to need that. So they handed her a legal pad and said, write down what you're feeling right now. And she essentially wrote down a confession and saying that she was down to her worst when she let her boys go, trying to win a man that never loved her. Which I thought, well, at least there's a sliver of honesty and insight right there. Apparently something else she had done prior to all of this was 2 suicide attempts. I wonder if actually it wasn't actual attempts, but just, again, as her ex had said, an attempt to get attention. That would track. The boys died on the 25th of October, 1994. Again, 9 days. A 9-day search before Susan was arrested in November, and then her trial was the following July. There is a new documentary, about 20 minutes long, and it's done by Grace Runkle. She is the reporter behind it. It's called 30 to Life, A Father's Fight for Justice. You can find that on foxcarolina.com. Go to the hamburger menu on the top left, and it's one of the options there is 30 to Life. So highly recommend watching that. It kind of covers all of the stuff. One thing that David says in that is that the trauma of this whole thing has made it so that he doesn't have a lot of clear memories of his boys, which is heartbreaking. And he says that in getting therapy, which he's done, it sounds like he's had multiple professionals telling him that the trauma of this whole thing, his brain can't handle those memories, and that when he is healed enough and can handle those memories, they will come back. And he hates the fact that he has very few memories of his boys, but he loves them. He thinks of them often. He uses the thought of them as strength to get through a lot. He has since remarried. In 2003, he married a woman named Tiffany, and they have 2 children. Their first is a daughter, and their second is a son. When I saw that, I thought, I wonder if having a daughter first was healing in some ways, because having a son first with his second wife might have been triggering in some ways, a little bit like too close to Michael and Alex. John D. Long Lake, there is a memorial set up, 2 stones for each of the boys. They're not buried there, but there's a memorial, and people often will bring flowers and small toys. Apparently children will often leave little toys there. And people say it's very touching because these children are bringing toys that they will no longer play with to give to little boys who will no longer be able to play. They have been remembered. And in the documentary, Michael even mentions a moment a few years ago where this old woman stopped him in the grocery store, recognizing him, and said, I just want you to know that I still think of you and your boys, and I still have a picture of them hanging on my fridge, along with pictures of my children and grandchildren. And I still pray for you. And when he told the story, his face lit up just a little bit, thinking, my boys are still remembered, and they've made an impact. These boys would have been in their early 30s if they were still alive today. November 20th, there'll be a parole hearing. We shall see what happens. A lot of people are really up in arms that she's even eligible. And again, if this had been a year later, she probably wouldn't be. But if you want to contact the parole board and voice your opinion, over 100 people have so far as I'm reporting this, probably more since. You can go to dppps.gov. That's 3 P's. So D, 3 P's, and then an s.gov. And there's a place there where you can then send feedback in regarding an upcoming parole situation and send in your own message about not wanting Susan Smith to get parole. She seems troubled, and as her ex says, even if we can feel bad and get bad for her, some people can forgive her perhaps, but she showed no remorse, and people have said that she seemed evil in the courtroom, that there's just a level of just evil. And if she is manipulative, as we have heard she is, I don't think she's safe to release. Would she commit this exact kind of crime again? I don't think she would be able to. I don't think she could have more children and do this kind of thing. But she's capable of who knows what else. Maybe she would do even a white collar crime. Who knows? But I don't think she is necessarily safe for society. So in my opinion, she should stay behind bars, both because of the nature of her crime and because I don't think she is safe for society. My personal opinion. Let me know what you think. I will update you on the parole board meeting when it happens on the 20th of November.